Hey guys, Taki here. I have a really exciting video for you today on a very powerful Android gaming handheld with a beautiful OLED screen. I've been poking around with this thing for the last few days and I'm pretty impressed with the gaming performance of this device and some of the bells and whistles that this thing has. This is the Neo Pocket Air, and in this video, we're going to do a first look at this device. In the interest of full disclosure, I do want to just say that this is an alpha prototype that's on loan from the company. There are some things that I'm not allowed to talk about in this early video, and some of them will be obvious to you while you're watching. This is really just a first look at a product that is still in active development. I will probably do an in-depth review of a release candidate down the line. So yeah, this is the Neo Pocket Air. If you feel like you have deja vu looking at this, you are not mistaken. This is the fourth product with this base design. So far we've had the Neo Air, the Neo Air Pro, the Neo Air Plus with 3 different versions, one of which is more powerful than the Pro, and now we have the Neo Pocket Air. This is something that is really unheard of in this market, but Aya will always keep you guessing. I don't know if I ever said it publicly at the time, but I always felt that the original Air, like the really thin one from the marketing material, wanted to be an Android device way more than a PC handheld. A lot of things that are bad or less than ideal when we're talking about a thin PC handheld don't exist when we swap out to an ARM processor. I've known that this was in development since around October of last year, so that's a good gauge for how long it takes to bring something like this to market when it's your first handheld. This is Aya's first Android handheld, and even in this alpha state, it's a lot better than ARM handhelds of companies that have been at this for a long time. I think we can start by going over some of the physical aspects of this device. This is the Famicom color option that they decided to go with to differentiate this from the rest of the Air line. We have an eggshell color for the front and back shells with red double injected buttons for the D-pad and ABXY. These both use conductive rubber for input. The analog sticks are Hall effect Ghoulie sticks that probably don't need any introduction, and these have a slightly tan or khaki rubber top to them. On the left side, we have start and select under the D-pad, and on the right, we have 2 buttons that don't do anything at this point, but they do generate a key code, so you could probably map them in an emulator if you wanted. As for the face buttons, someone commented that it was a bit strange that they decided to go with an Xbox layout for these when Nintendo is way more common, and I didn't think it was strange until I read that. This isn't intended to be a streaming handheld, so this could have been done to reuse an existing mold from the PC handhelds, or it just wasn't considered. For what it's worth, these controls register as an Xbox 360 controller in apps and emulators, and they connect via USB internally, which is not that common. We'll talk more about that later on. On the top of the device, we have a set of stacked shoulder buttons with Hall effect triggers for R2 and L2. These use magnets for input and have very little in the way of dead zones and are great for a lot of games. In the middle, we have 2 hotkey buttons wired through GPIO that don't do anything at this point, but they are mappable. That leaves us with a fingerprint combo button that works very well, a volume rocker that works in reverse, what I'm assuming is a microphone, and our fan exhaust. There's nothing on either side of the unit, but we do have some cool stuff on the bottom. We have a set of stereo speakers, an SD card slot that I'm not allowed to remove, a headphone jack, and a single Type-C port. This thing supports DP video out, as well as USB host and charging. I don't know what the maximum resolution is on that DisplayPort signal, but I would assume that it's at least 1080p. I also don't know if it just mirrors the device screen, but I hope that it doesn't for reasons that I'll talk about later. That leaves us with the back, and there's not a whole lot going on here. You can see that we have a huge area here for air intake, and that's for a good reason. Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to open this up on camera, but they never told me that I couldn't open it up off camera, and now it's way too late for me to ask for permission. So this will be the first time that they'll know that I did it. So I'm going to describe what I saw. On the left and the right sides, we have vibration motors, but I don't know what type they are because they're blocked by daughter boards. There's a big battery under this logo, but I'm not sure what the capacity is because it might change for the retail version. It looks a lot bigger than the one that was used in the Switch Lite for reference, and maybe there's room for an even bigger one down the line. Under this air vent, there is a huge fan with copper heat pipes under it and a big radiator near the top. I have never seen a fan this big in an Android handheld. It's nuts. This is kind of skipping forward a little, but this fan has 3 fan profiles that you can use. The high fan setting is probably 30 or 40% lower than the Steam Deck fan at max speed, but it's overkill. I started out doing all of my tests with the medium profile because I didn't want to deal with any throttling, but then I changed over to low because even that was overkill. The low fan profile is on par with the switch light under load, just to give you an idea of the sound level. I cannot hear it while I'm gaming unless I put my ear next to this vent. Let's move over to talk about the screen. This is the same screen that was used in the Neo Air and the Air Pro. This isn't the only Android handheld with an OLED screen right now, but it's way better on so many levels. This is a modern OLED panel and it's perfect for an emulation handheld like this. It's a 16:9 panel, so you don't have to worry about any of that wonky stuff that you can see in some of the other powerful handhelds that are out there today, and it makes retro games pop, especially when we use bigger shaders. I measured this panel last year, but I wanted to do it again in case something changed. You can see the relevant stats on screen right now. In terms of gaming handhelds that I've tested on this channel, this screen is in my top 4 for benchmarks. It has good color reproduction and good maximum and minimum brightness levels. The only real downside is this bezel, so I hope that we see a painted option like we had with the white Neo Air. If we play retro games that don't go full screen and we don't have borders applied, the edges of the game will just blend into this border, so it's not as bad as it would be with a standard IPS screen. I want to take a moment to talk about software because I think that's where this product will make it or break it. On PC, we have companies that sell hardware and software with their handhelds, but we also have companies that only sell hardware, and they do well because the truth is, there's almost always a good free option available that can do the same thing. That's not really the case on Android, and there are a ton of things that you really want to be implemented on a system level because they either don't work well or don't work at all if they aren't. I said this device is an alpha prototype, but it's probably a beta prototype in terms of hardware. The software is at a very early stage at this point, and there's a big team busy at work implementing a bunch of new ideas. Let's go over what we have now, what they have planned before this releases, and what I hope they implement on top of that to make this a better product. In terms of software that we have today, there's not a lot. We have an Android 12 build with no G-app support, but that's not something that's difficult to overcome. Most of the things that have been added to this are right in this pull-down menu. We have the fan profile options that I talked about before with low, medium, and high, but we also have something called hand lever, and this is something that is unique to this device. This button handles the controller connection in this handheld. When it's enabled, your device essentially has a USB gamepad connected to the main board. There are good reasons to do something like this, but I don't think they are widely known, and I don't think they are the reason why this is set up like this. The only impact that this has when it is on is that you lose some USB functionality out of the bottom port. You cannot do USB mass storage, and you cannot use ADB. If you want to use either of those, you need to disable the controls with this toggle until you're done. I don't think that we lose video out support when the controls are enabled. You can also charge the device when the controls are enabled. Outside this menu, this device will have some custom apps. The one that I have for this video is called Aya Home. It has a main row of favorites that you're able to customize with custom backgrounds for each, and it also has an app list under it with all of your installed apps. This is basically a launcher. They don't have anything in the way of a ROM launcher, so I just used a free option for this video, but they do have one planned called Aya Space Retro Game. If done well, I think this could be a good option for people that are new to Android. It should operate in a similar way to some of the good front ends that are out there. This device will also have a pull-out menu that is similar to their Windows handheld. The important things here would be the performance modes that probably change the CPU and GPU clocks, but it also has easier access to the fan options. Outside of that, they also plan to create a screen mapping solution for games that do not have native controller support. I mentioned before that I hope this device can output a second screen over the Type-C port, and that's because I hope that they are not only able to offer 4K output support instead of just mirroring a 1080p signal, but that they would also consider implementing some of the awesome features that we see in Samsung phones that have DeX support or gaming phones like the Red Magic series. It would be very cool if this handheld was able to have a console mode like the Red Magic 8 Pro, where you gain the ability to use a keyboard and mouse for touchscreen games, or run PC games or a full desktop OS when and if this device gets a Linux release. I think that would be an awesome value-added feature for this device. So we've talked a lot about this device in this video, but you're probably wondering what the specs are, and that's another thing that I'm unfortunately not allowed to discuss. The specs that I can disclose are on screen now. This unit has 6 GB of RAM and a 1080p OLED screen. The only other restriction that I have is that I'm not allowed to do any benchmarks on this, but I can play and record any game that I want, and that can give you a good idea of what we're working with. I'm going to go through a few games in this video, but I will do a much bigger video just on emulation performance after this one is done. This video is already getting kind of long for a first look at an alpha device. Let's kick things off with Android games. We don't have screen mapping tech built into this device, so we need to use a random app for that, and we also don't have an FPS counter. I'm going to wrap up this video with a few emulated games. I'll have a much bigger video covering emulation on this in just a bit, so feel free to leave any titles that you want tested down below. If I end up picking something that you suggest, you will see your name listed as a card in that video. Just to give you an idea of what's in store, this is Wii running at 1080p, and we do have an FPS counter for this. And here's PS2. I have this set at 2x native resolution, but that's not the most that we could probably do with this device. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for this one. I hope you enjoyed this first look at the Pocket Air. Happy gaming, everyone.